Dr. Parthasarathi. Dr. Parthasarathi is a practicing Ayurveda Vaidya, currently heading SDJ Ayurvedalaya as a Director and Chief Medical Officer. Prior to taking on the mission at SDJ, on the invitation and blessing of Pujya Swami Dayanand Saraswati Ji, Dr. Parthasarathi was heading the International Training Academy and a branch hospital of the well-known Aryavaida Pharmacy, and has served as a course director for many courses organized in collaboration with universities and organizations in India, Brazil, Japan, Switzerland, USA, Argentina, Spain, and Indonesia. Dr. Parthasarathi has a very good command over Sanskrit and can also fluently converse in Sanskrit. I promise you today he's going to present in English, but this is an interesting data point because he's an Ayurvedic doctor that he's proficient in Sanskrit. He was also honored with the prestigious title of illustrious guest by the National University of Medicine, Rosario, Argentina, subsequent to the 7-day workshop on integrating Ayurveda in daily medical practice for 150 doctors in the university. He has also given short-term and long-term courses in many medical universities in South America and India. Now, when you think about an Ayurvedic doctor, what comes to my mind, and I have been to a couple in my life, is this, stern-looking gentleman who tells you, the 270 things you cannot eat because you are under Ayurvedic treatment. The good thing about Dr. Parthasarathi is he's been able to maintain the tradition of this medicine and at the same time contextualize it to international audiences as well, which is like he's done a great blend of from a traditional medicine to making it more contemporary. In fact, he's so international that he chose this slot today because today from 3 to 9, he's again busy addressing an audience in Brazil. So thank you, Dr. Parthasarathi, for taking out the time from your extremely busy schedule. I suspect that your session will be the one with the most number of questions. Don't ask me why, but I suspect it will be. But we are all looking forward to hearing from you on Ayurveda, the original system for total well-being. Welcome, Dr. Parthasarathi.
Namaste, everyone. So thank you so much, Ji. Thanks for the introduction. Pranams to Swamijis and all the respected dignitaries. So it's a great honor to present the wisdom of Ayurveda in this Vedic Wisdom Festival. Let me start with a small prayer. Guru Ganeshabhyam Namaha. Ragadirogan satatanushaktan asheshakaya prasritan asheshan autsukya moha ratidan jaghana yo purva vaidyaya namostu tasmai. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. So nice to see so many of you. I'm eagerly waiting to share the Ayurvedic wisdom. You are hearing the Vedic wisdom, and you are yet to hear the Vedic wisdom from various masters and stalwarts. I'm going to present the Ayurvedic wisdom. So what is the Ayurvedic wisdom that we can follow and we can bring it into our practice to enjoy a healthy life and to enhance our state of well-being? That is going to be the topic of discussion today for the next 90 minutes or so. Just to give you an overview of what we are going to see in this session, in this 90 minutes, we are going to see the aspects of Ayurveda mentioned in the Vedas. And we will also be seeing the Vedantic vision of Ayurveda. In many a times we can see this Vedantic vision of Ayurveda. Vedanta, Yoga, Nyaya Shastra, all these are woven into the main core, the body of knowledge of Ayurveda. We'll be seeing a bit of that. And I have also proposed to understand the aspects of dharma from an Ayurvedic perspective, and hearing Pujya Swami Omkarananda Mahaswamigal, he has paved the way for me, and this topic or this part of the topic is going to be a cakewalk for me, because he has made a thorough foundation of the understanding of dharma, so that introducing the Ayurvedic perspective is not going to be a difficult task. And the main aspect of the topic, the main part of the topic is going to be the fourth point, which is the Ayurveda's Upadeshas. Upadeshas are the advices. What are the Ayurveda's Upadeshas for well-being? And we are also going to see the Dharma Shastra's parallel opinions on those Ayurveda advices. When we see some advice about when we see some advices or the Upadeshas of Ayurveda, we also see those similar advices with a different tone or with a different flavor in Dharma Shastra, so that if one can follow both the Upadeshas of Ayurveda and also the Upadeshas of Dharma Shastra, it's an added advantage and an add-on benefit. So why don't we make use of that? And these next two topics, that is the last two topics, that is the Dharma from an Ayurveda perspective and including Dharma Shastra into the Ayurveda's Upadesha, has been made so easy for me because of Mahaswamigal's presentation I just heard before. So Ayurveda in Vedic wisdom, just few minutes of understanding what is Ayurveda's presence in this Vedic wisdom. As you already must be knowing, Ayuhu and Veda together makes the word Ayurveda. Ayuhu, we can discuss so many hours, we can discuss together about what this Ayu is and what this Veda is. And I am sure you all must be knowing what Veda is. Veda is not just, people tell Ayurveda is Ayuhu plus Veda, knowledge of life, but it doesn't stop there. When we understand all the aspects of life, then we understand how vast this subject matter of Ayurveda is, because life is that vast. The understanding of life is that vast. And Veda, we all must be knowing this definitions of various definitions or various understandings about Veda. Vidasattayam, Vetignyane, you would have heard about all these definitions. That is, to put it across in a simple way, Veda is the knowledge that exists. It is not something that has been put across by someone. It is the knowledge that exists, Sattaya. Vetignyane, Vindade Vindati Praptau, that is the knowledge that exists. It is available for our conceptualization. It is available for us to analyze, and also it is available for us to have an experiential effect. So the knowledge or the wisdom or the informations that are available for us to analyze, introspect, and also experientially, that is, experiment it and get the benefit of it. So if a subject matter covers all these platforms, it is called as Veda. So Ayuhu Veda, that Ayurveda itself is composed of a word that is Veda. So that is, we will see a little bit more about this. We could find the references about Ayurveda across all the four Vedas. The references of Ayurveda is accessible. Rig Veda mentions about medicinal herbs and plants. It is not just mentioning medicinal plants and herbs for internal use, or just, it is not just explaining the medicinal properties, but it is also explaining. Rig Veda, we find the references of using medicinal plants that can be weared as amulets or weared as tied around our hip, tied as amulets, and our hands used as anklets, and so many things, especially in the context of poisoning, etc. These herbs are used in different forms. Atharva Veda, in addition to explaining a lot of herbs, Atharva Veda, we can also find references about human physiological processes, about organs, about functions. All this is seen in Atharva Veda too. We would have heard about Shatapatha Brahmana, that is explained, that's a commentary of Shukla Yajurveda. We can find the references of human anatomy, different parts of the body, anatomical information about body. We can find about that in Shatapatha Brahmana. And Ayurveda itself is considered as an Upanga of Atharva Veda. Upanga is an auxiliary part of Atharva Veda, that is an add-on part of Atharva Veda. So in a simple way, we can conclude that Ayurveda wisdom is actually a part of Vedic wisdom. It is not that we are searching Ayurveda wisdom in Vedic wisdom is not the idea. Ayurveda's wisdom is a part of our Vedic wisdom. So the Mangala Shloka, or the prayer that I started this session with, is again the same. Ragadi Rogan Satatanu Shaktan Asheshakaya Prasritan Asheshan Autsukya Moha Aratitan Jaghan Yo Apurva Vaidyaya Namostu Tasmai. I am saluting the Apurva Vaidya, the rarest physician, a physician of a rare quality. Apurva, we could not have seen a physician like that before, and we cannot see a physician of this caliber after. So that kind of a rare physician we are saluting. And what is the speciality of that rare physician is he can completely take off all the diseases, Asheshakaya, without leaving any trace. He can remove all the diseases. I am saluting that physician. So what are the diseases that this rare physician is warding off or taking away? The shloka starts like Ragadi Rogan. Rogas are the diseases. So this physician who can ward off or take away the diseases starting from Raga. Raga, you would have already seen, you would have being students of Vedanta and closely associated with Vedanta, you must be knowing what Raga, Dvesha is. So starting from Raga, which means it includes Raga, Dvesha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, Icha, Dvesha, all that, Kama, all that is coming into the category of Raga, Raga Adi, Raga, and etc. So Raga Adi Rogan, when we have so many diseases known to us and new diseases coming on the way, like our COVID-19, there are so many diseases on earth that people are suffering with. But while giving a prayer, in this context, it is being mentioned that Raga Adi Rogas is the description that is being given. All the diseases starting with Raga. So here we get to understand two philosophies or two understandings is possible in this context of using this term Raga Adi Rogan. One is all the diseases that are starting from Raga, Dvesha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya, etc., and then leading to Jwara, Raktapitta, Pakshagata, paralysis, all that, cancers, all that is included in this understanding. But another fine print understanding that is being conveyed here in this shloka is Raga Adi Rogan, that is all the diseases that starts with Raga. That is the fine print understanding, meaning every single disease starts with Raga. So whatever the diseases, there is an influence at the level of at the level of mind or the level of psyche. So even if it is considered as a COVID-19 disease, there is a possibility of a problem that has established at the level of mind, and then that is establishing at the level of the body. So any disease first has an impact or first has an impairment at the level of mind. So that is the explanation or the knowledge that we can get from this Mangala Shloka. So when a problem is arising at the level of mind and then it is afflicting the body, The solution for a problem that is happening at the level of mind is found more in Vedanta than in Ayurveda. I'll be talking about it in the next slide. After the prayers, the first shloka, the opening verse of the text, Ashtanga Hridaya or Ashtanga Sangraha, goes like this. Ayukkamaya manena dharmartha sukha sadhanam ayurvedopadesheshu vidheya paramadaraha. Okay. That is Ayurveda upadesheshu. That is Ayurveda's upadeshas videyaha paramadaraha. Follow the upadeshas religiously. Follow it precisely. What shall we follow? We should follow the Ayurveda upadeshas, Ayurveda's advices. And who should follow this Ayurveda's upadeshas precisely and religiously? One who is having ayukkama, one who is desirous of life. And why should he be desirous of life? Because it is dharma, artha, sukha, sadhanam. It is a sadhana, or it is the instrument. Our ayuhu, our life is the instrument, or it is the sadhana with which one can attain the purusharthas, dharma, artha, sukha. Sukha, tatkala sukha is kama, sashvata sukha is moksha. So dharmartha sukha meaning dharmartha kama moksha. So if you try to understand the aim of Ayurveda, this has been explained as the prayojana of Ayurveda, or the aim of Ayurveda. So to put it across in a simple way, what is the aim of Ayurveda? Aim of Ayurveda is to help a person to attain the purusharthas. So we had a discussion about purusharthas. Swamiji had beautifully explained about the purusharthas also. So Ayurveda is helping a person to attain or to follow the purusharthas or achieve the purusharthas, that is dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Also in Charaka Samhita, it is mentioned that dharma, artha, kama, mokshanam arogyam moolam uttamam. That is, for one to follow or one to practice this dharma, artha, kama, moksha prapti, or to attain this dharma, artha, kama, moksha, one should have arogyam. Arogya is the foundational principle without which one cannot attain this purusharthas. So Ayurveda's aim is also a philosophical aim, or the prayojana, or the aim of Ayurveda is philosophical, to help a person attain his purusharthas. So that's the Vedantic vision of Ayurveda. And when it comes to psychological perturbances or the disturbances at the level of mind or the psyche, the solution given in the early explanations, the earlier chapters of Ayurveda explains that dhi dhairyatmadi vijnanam mano dosha aushadam param. The aushada, or the medicine for mano doshas, or the problems in the mind, is dhi dhairya atmadi vijnanam. Atmadi vijnanam, atmajnanam. Atmajnanam, understanding the self-knowledge. The self-knowledge is something that we get from Vedanta. So Atmajnanam is a solution for a mano dosha. We already saw that every disease starts with a mano dosha. Every disease starts with raga, etc. So Vedanta is completely present in it is inherently present in the philosophy and explanations of Ayurveda. Dhi, dhairya is like courage, bravery, etc. Sattva, vajaya, chikitsa. Chikitsa, or the treatments, are divided into three categories. Yukti vyapashraya, a Vaidya uses his logic to prescribe some medicines or prescribe some suggestions, give some suggestions, etc. At the same time, there are two other types of treatments. One is sattva avajaya chikitsa, to improve the sattva of the individual, and there is another third variety of treatment called daiva vyapashraya chikitsa. That is mani, mantra, homa, niyama, prayaschitta, prashamana, all this are included as daiva vyapashraya chikitsa. Improving the sattva of the person, Vedanta can take an amazing role in improving the sattva of the person. So let us see what is this Ayurvedic. I told we will be seeing the Ayurvedic perspective of Dharma. Before that, though it is made so clear with Swamiji's presentation or Swamiji's session, I'm just bringing out a simple way of understanding for the sake of going forward with this topic. So we have understood with Swamiji's session that following Dharma is an important aspect in our Vedic culture. So everything has to be done with a Dharma. Furthermore, we will be seeing what is Ayurveda's particular viewpoint on this. But there are situations where, because of our Ichcha and Dvesha, we are confused to understand what is Dharma and what is Adharma. And many a times what happens is we misunderstand Dharma as Adharma and Adharma as Dharma. So we are not clear about what should be done, whether it is correct or not. And when it comes to the context of the Dharma prescribed in Ayurveda, what should one do to maintain his health or improve his health? Ayurveda's say is so clear what should be done, what should not be done, what are avoidables, etc. But in situations when we are entangled in some situations, we get to have a misunderstanding that, okay, this is not correct and this is correct. And all the more with the pumping of informations through our WhatsApp and Facebook, every day we get to hear so many new informations. We are confused what to follow, what is correct, what is wrong. People are totally confused about what is correct and what is wrong. So it is giving a catch situation. People are interested to follow certain advices, but people are interested to follow what is good for health. But there are a lot of confusions on what is correct and what is wrong. And what is told as correct today, with all the modern researches and documentation and scientific theories, what is confirmed as that is good for today, tomorrow it is told that no, that is wrong, that is not good, and this is good. We have heard so many things. May it be our food, may it be our lifestyle. So many things are told to us at one point of time that doing this is good. But after some time, we hear that no, that is totally wrong. Don't do this. We have heard about this in terms of using oils or ghee. Don't take oil, coconut oil is bad, ghee is bad at one time, and then the whole world propagates that ghee and coconut oil are amazing. One has to take ghee and coconut oil. Eat 8 times a day, 9 times a day, eat frequently. Now the whole world is following no, intermittent fasting, eat only 2 times a day. So we are confused. So in such situation, what is the solution that we can have? The solution is to follow the scriptures, which is readily available to us. Or the second option is we have something called a tradition, which is a time-tested phenomenon practiced by our ancestors. And whatever our tradition is, whatever our traditional practices are, they are in tune with the explanations or the wisdom of the scriptures. We are going to see that as we go forward. So we all know Dharma Shastra. Swamiji also mentioned about Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra is an Upanga of Vedas. We also get to know in this session, we'll be seeing various presentations or various explanations of Dharma Shastra that is allied with health or that is allied with Ayurveda. We have various dharmas. We have Kula Dharma, Yuddha Dharma, Putra Dharma, Sahodara Dharma, Stri Dharma. We have even Maithuna Dharma. For every aspect of our life, our Shastra has given us what is the Dharma, what is the righteous way of doing that. Our Shastra brings out the righteous deeds one has to do in that aspect. We have Varnashrama Dharma, etc. So we'll be seeing what is the Dharma that has to be followed in terms of our daily living. What is the Ayurveda's Upadeshas? What is the explanation of Ayurveda's Dharma when it comes to daily living, starting from waking up until going to bed? So Ayurveda Upadesha. This is the main aspect of the topic. We are getting into the main aspect of the topic. So as I told you, we'll be seeing various Upadeshas or advices put forth by the rishis and munis of Ayurveda. Dharma Shastra Upadeshas are also included. As we go forward, we'll be seeing the parallelism of this Dharma Shastra Upadeshas, as I had mentioned. And the positiveness is that the Upadeshas of Ayurveda that we are going to hear now can be easily implemented for the well-being, and we can immediately experience a tangible benefit of putting this Upadeshas into practice. So I have chosen, with the limitation of the time, I've chosen the most essential Upadeshas, or the Upadeshas or the advices where we usually go wrong. And also I have taken the Upadeshas which are directly understandable without going into the philosophical aspect of Ayurveda. Because many a time what happens is the advices, when we give an advice, it goes as the 101st advice, because you have already had 100 advices. So it goes as 101 advice, the 101st advice, which you are again neglecting. So giving an advice is easy, but giving a logic and philosophical background behind an advice is essential. But in this limited time, it is not possible to give you the philosophical background of the advices of Ayurveda. So we have selected the advices or the Upadeshas of Ayurveda, which doesn't require much of a philosophical input or the foundational principles, input of foundational principles. And as I told you, and there are also aspects where people are having that confusion. Is this correct or wrong? All that will be clarified with the Upadeshas that we are going forward from now on. Along with that, parallelly with the Upadeshas that we are going to hear, we can relish and we can appreciate the nuances of our Vedic wisdom. The thoroughness of the Vedic wisdom will be understood as we go with the explanation of the Ayurveda's Upadeshas from now on. But the limitation that we have is, as I told you, we cannot explain the logic and reasoning behind the Upadeshas because the time constraint, and the foundational principles, we have not set the stage, because for a person who has understood the foundational principles of Ayurveda, which is again backed up with Nyaya, Sankhya, Vaisheshika, Vedanta, Mimamsa, etc. One who is not prepared with the foundational principles, or one who was not equipped with the foundational principles, giving a reasoning makes some kind of a difficulty, which I don't want to mess up the topic. Instead, give some simple information which is practically followable and understandable. So I'm not going into the serious aspects. So waking up, the first thing that we do, we start our day with this. What does Ayurveda tell us? Brahme muhurtam uttishte swasto rakshartam ayushaha. One who is willing to improve his health, one who's willing to protect his life. Brahme muhurte uttishte. Get up or wake up at Brahma Muhurta. So what is Brahma Muhurta? Most of us must be knowing. The last 3 hours of the night, or the 3 hours before sunrise, is considered as Brahma Muhurta. There are different opinions of Arunodaya Kala, Brahma Muhurta, the time slots of Brahma Muhurta. But a most easiest understanding for us to follow, a simple explanation that can be easily registered and that can be followed, is we can accept the Brahma Muhurta as the last 3 hours of the night, or the 3 hours just before sunrise. Sleeping during Brahma Muhurta, our Dharma Shastra explains, Brahme Muhurte Yanidra Punyakshayakarini. Swami, Puja Swami, Puja Swami Omkarananda Swamigal also had mentioned about, if one is not following Dharma, he is entitled to suffer with the Papa, or he will not get that Punya. If you are not following Dharma, you are not getting the Punya. We got to hear this kind of an explanation from Swamigal. So If one is sleeping at Brahma Muhurta, Punya Kshaya Karini. Already our accumulated Punya is so minimum in this Kali Yuga. And if that Punya, the most minimum Punya that we have accumulated, if it is going to be deteriorated by sleeping in Brahma Muhurta, you can imagine what the ill effect is. So one has to get up at Brahma Muhurta, but there is always a small exception, or there is always a small nuance to it in whatever that is told in Ayurveda. There is that will be allied with, or that will try to answer the question who should follow, why he should follow, what is the reasoning, when he should follow, why not he should follow. All that reasonings will be given along with the explanations. So here, Jirna Ajirna Nirupayan. So try to understand if you have digested your previous night's meal or not. If you have not digested the previous meal, if you feel that the previous night's food is still lingering in your stomach, then don't wake up at Brahma Muhurta, go back to sleep. The deterioration of Punya by sleeping in Brahma Muhurta is far better than the physical damage that you are going to experience by waking up with the previous night's food undigested. So how to understand this previous night's food is digested or not? It's not a rocket science. You get up in the morning. If you have the previous night's food undigested, you will feel that food in the body. You'll have that burps. There is an uncomfortable feeling, and there is no eagerness for the next meal. That kind of a situation, all of us would have experienced this at some point in our life. So ensuring the previous night's food being completely digested is an important landmark. If you are not experiencing that, go back to sleep. Don't worry about the Punya Kshaya. That is far better. So this is an important point. So here we also get an add-on information that our dinner should be in such a way, or our dinner should be at a time, so that the time at which we take the dinner is appropriate, so that the next day morning at Brahma Muhurta, when we get up, the food is digested, and the quality and the quantity of the food that we take for dinner should be appropriate and simple, to the extent that next day morning when we get up, it should be digested. So many a times we cannot take this as an excuse that we get up in the morning. I think we will get up with difficulty, we will get up at Brahma Muhurta, then our monkey mind will tell, I think my previous night's food is not digested, so I will go back to sleep. So this is not a point of excuse. Then Ayurveda also tells Sandhyasu Abhyavahara Stri Swapna Adhyayana Chintanam. What we should not do at Sandhya. Sandhya is the transition period between day and night, and the transition period between the night and the day. That is dawn and dusk. At dawn and dusk, what one should not do? One should not sleep. Swapna, one should not sleep. So we get two-way confirmations. Get up at Brahma Muhurta, 1. Don't sleep at Brahma Muhurta, it is Punya Kshaya, 2, with Dharma Shastra. And Ayurveda re-emphasizes, do not sleep at Sandhya. That is, if you have lost the timing of Brahma Muhurta, if you are not up at Brahma Muhurta, you've already suffered the papa of sleeping at Brahma Muhurta. Then comes the dawn, and if you are still continuing to sleep at dawn, it is again erroneous as per the explanations of Ayurveda. So one should not sleep, yes, understood. As an add-on information, what should not be done at Sandhya as per Ayurveda is, one should not eat at Sandhya, that is dawn at dusk. One should not eat. Stri, sexual activity is to be avoided. Adhyayana, studying, learning is also to be avoided at this time. And Chintanam, thinking, should be avoided at this time. So what can I do? The question is, what else can I do? That is the best time where the sattva of the nature is so strong, where we can utilize it for the activities of prayer, meditation, dhyana, all that can be done. For example, we see the Sandhya Vandanam is being done at Sandhya because the prayers are the best thing that we can do at this period. And after waking up, the first thing nowadays what people do is drinking gallons and gallons of water, the 2 gallons and gallons of hot water. So what does Ayurveda say? Of course, Ayurveda promotes hot water or warm water throughout the day, excepting summer seasons where it is told that even cold water that is made cold by keeping it in an earthen pot can be consumed. But except in summer season, hot water is suggested or warm water is suggested to be consumed throughout the day, but except as a first thing in the morning. But people drink warm water as a first thing in the morning, and they believe that that helps in their evacuation processes. That is an artificial help, okay? And they drink gallons and gallons of hot water, which creates a compression or a pressure in the stomach, which enables them to evacuate. It's a pressure evacuation. That's an artificial way of evacuating. So drinking warm water or hot water in a huge quantity, definitely not advised in Ayurveda. So Usha Panam, Usha Samayam, Ushas, in temples they do Usha Puja, that is early morning. So even in Brahma Muhurta, drinking warm water is told, and this water should be drunk sip by sip, because the body was in a totally different state in the night, and it is going to be a totally different state during the day. And this transition period, we cannot do dramatic things. So it has to be taken sip by sip, and the maximum quantity explained in the text of Ayurveda and the later text of Ayurveda is around 730 ml, nothing more than that. And 730 ml is not a standard quantity that everyone should drink. 730 ml is not the idea. Up to 730 ml. You should not force yourself and drink. And nowadays, people add honey into it, cinnamon into it, that turmeric, and the list goes on. People try to add as much as possible, because now we are all obsessed with an idea that every substance has some property. So we take all the substances together, we get the benefit of all the property. This is an obsessive behavior or an obsessive attitude that we see in the present day scenario. The Shastra suggests as Ushapanam, that is the thing that can be taken as a first thing in the morning, can be Sukoshna Kshira. If at all we are taking milk, there is a permissibility to take it slightly warm. And if it is water, it has to be room temperature or body temperature, depending upon the season. Or we can have Madhutaka, Madhu and Udaka, honey and water mixed together. Honey and water mixed together has been explained in multiple aspects. And the thing is that people, because of their preconceived notion of taking hot water, they mix honey with hot water, and they believe that it is going to help them in weight loss. Honey and hot water drinking for weight loss is the worst thing that one can do. But this is the most famous advice or the most famous recipe, and all the more famous if you are willing or if you are planning to lose weight. So hot water has a property to lose weight, yes. Honey has a property to lose weight. It is having a property of chedana. It can help in lose weight, yes. So people believe when you mix both together, we will get double effect. No, you will get an opposite effect. You will have indigestion and you will have problems with which you can even gain weight. So our Shastra beautifully explains that in the context of honey, Ushnam, Ushnartam, Ushnecha, that is Ushna is something which is totally not conducive for honey. Honey should not be taken by a person who is having a hot constitution, heat in the body. Honey should not be taken with any substance that is hot. Honey should not be mixed with any substance that is hot. Honey should not be cooked or made hot. Honey should not be taken in a hot ritu, hot season, like summers. Don't take honey. Nature tells you, in summer, do we have honey bees or the honeycombs? No. When is this honey available in plenty? It is available in Shishira Ritu, Vasanta Ritu. Vasanta Ritu is the period, or the spring season is the period where lot of flowers is seen around us and honey is available in abundance. And if you go into the explanation of Vasanta Ritu, Madhu or honey is an important aspect, is an important advice. So honey does not go well with heat. So drinking hot water with honey, I think many of you would have practiced it before or still practicing, or we know so many people who are doing it. It's a direct no. Honey with anything that is hot, it's a direct no. That's an add-on message along with waking up at Brahma Muhurta. So next is Krita Shaucha Vidhistataha. Do Shaucha Vidhi. Do all the purificatory or the cleansing procedures. Cleansing of not just the body, cleansing of the mind is also intricately involved in the explanations of Ayurveda. Attending to one's nature's call, that is Mala Visarjanam, evacuating the stools, evacuating or urinating, etc., is the first thing that is being explained to be taken care of. Brushing meaning using toothbrushes, the present day scenario, what was suggested in those days? What was the wisdom of Ayurveda when it comes to brushing? We are going to see that. Cleaning the mouth, what are the different methodologies in which Ayurveda, what are the methodologies that Ayurveda suggests that one should practice? Bath. We all must be thinking, what is this? We all know this. You all know this, but see the intricacy that comes along with an explanation of the wisdom of Ayurveda. Achamanam. Achamanam is something which I'll be explaining that. This is the pointer actually. Prayer and meditation is also included along with this. First thing is elimination. That is, among these, we are going to go to these pointers one by one. Elimination, eliminating our feces and having urination. Our Dharma Shastra also suggests that this eliminatory processes should be done before Sandhya. And it coincides so beautifully with Ayurveda that this Brahma Muhurta period is a period where Vata dosha is predominant in nature and Vata dosha is predominant in us. When Vata dosha is predominant in us or Vata dosha is in full action, all the activities of Vata will be happening so easily. If you try to analyze what are the functions of Vata, evacuation or elimination is one of the main function of Vata dosha. Those of you who know what Vata dosha is, yes, it is fine. If at all you don't know Vata dosha, don't get worried about it. It's not possible to explain what the Vata dosha is in this limitation, in this limited time. But still, if you don't know what Vata dosha is, don't worry about it. It is just a factor that is helpful in various functioning of our body, including the eliminatory processes. If one misses the time slot of getting up at Brahma Muhurta, if one gets up at the first part of the morning, that period is dominated by Kapha, or in other words, to put it across in a simple way, I can tell that it is dominated by slowness, lethargy, sluggishness, etc. That slowness, lethargy, sluggishness can be experienced even in the evacuation. So we all know that when we get up by mistake, for those of you who don't have the practice of getting up at Brahma Muhurta, by mistake, if you are awake at Brahma Muhurta, you'll be experiencing that you feel so fresh. You feel that you are not feeling sleepy, but you see the clock, it is just 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning. What am I going to do? You go back to sleep. And sleeping longer, you feel that you will feel good, but you get up at 7:30, you would have already lost that energetic feel, or you would have lost that enthusiasm that you would have experienced in Brahma Muhurta. You will be feeling sluggish and lethargy. That is the nature of the day. The nature's, that's a nature's, I don't get a good word for it. A dictation of nature. Nature dictates what you should do and when you should do. So one of the dictation of nature is that one should get up at Brahma Muhurta, where you feel that enthusiasm, where you feel that lightness. At the same time, the evacuatory processes are happening so easily. For those of you who don't have the practice of getting up at Brahma Muhurta, you can remember or you can recollect that at around this time, by around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, you will be woken up with an urge of urination or an urge to evacuate, or at least an urge of flatulence. You attend to that urge, or sometimes you don't even attend to that urge and sleep off, which is the worst thing, actually speaking. because that's a nature's time where all these urges are happening in a easy way, in a simple manner, or it happens with ease, rather. I could put it across this way. It happens with ease. So we should not miss that time slot. So from tomorrow, if someone tells that, okay, from tomorrow I will be practicing getting up at Brahma Muhurta. Tomorrow you wake up at Brahma Muhurta, I give you a cautionary note, you will not have normal evacuation also, because your sleep pattern is disrupted. So within 3 or 4 days, you will experience it, but you will not experience that ease in evacuation within the first day or the second day. So Shastra also tells we should not vega dharanam is to be avoided. That is withholding the urges, not attending to the natural call, nature's call is definitely not advisable. And initiating the urge is also not advisable. That is, you get up at 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, that natural establishment of urge will not happen that easily. That is, the urge will not initiate that easily. You need some support. People tell, I need a coffee, I need to have breakfast, fill up my stomach, and then I'll have an evacuation. Or I drink gallons of water, fill up my stomach, so that with the pressure I'll have evacuation. You need a support for evacuation. The urge will not happen naturally. But the Shastra tells, Vegan na dharayet, vegan na udhirayet. Don't control the urge, don't initiate the urge. So initiation of urge and controlling of urge is both are harmful. We should not be doing that. So if you are not waking up at Brahma Muhurta, one, you are controlling the urge that is naturally happening at Brahma Muhurta, or number two, you are initiating the urge forcefully, which is not that easy to happen when you wake up, when you have a habit of waking up late, because you are waking up at a kapha dominant time. Then this is actually too much, but I just wanted to bring in the nuances of our Shastra, or the parallelism between Ayurveda and Dharma Shastra. You find the reference of Dharma Shastra that after evacuation, one has to wash the anal region 5 times, one has to wash the urinary area twice, one has to wash the left hand 10 times, one has to wash both the hands and both the feet 7 times. Sorry for the mistake here. It is 7 times. It is not 10 times. The last one. Wash both hands and legs 7 times individually. So you can understand the importance of hygiene that is being put across, or the nuances. Even how many times you have to wash your hand is being put across by Dharma Shastra, in Dharma Shastra. When it comes to oral hygiene, the first thing we do about oral hygiene is brushing our teeth, and the disaster starts there. Disaster not for your health, but the disaster for the system starts there, because we take a sweet toothpaste and start brushing. So the first perceivable taste that gets in contact with our body, or that gets into our mouth, is sweetness, which is against the principles of Ayurveda. Kashaya Katutiktakam. Kashaya Katutiktakam is bitter, pungent, and astringent are the taste that is being suggested to be used for brushing our teeth. And in those days, did they, thousands and thousands of years before, were there toothbrushes? No. But there were herbal toothbrushes. What are these herbal toothbrushes? The Shastra explains, Arkanya Groda Kadira Karanja Kakubadikam Pratar Bhuktva cha Mridvagram Kashaya Kadutiktakam. List of herbs, Agra, Nyagroda, Udumbara, etc. List of herbs, Arka, Nyagroda, etc. List of herbs are mentioned. You take those herbs, Pratar Bhuktva cha Mridvagram, you chew the tip of it, make it like a bristle. Bristles, like our toothbrush bristles, these twigs of herbs are, the tip of it is chewed, and those are made like bristles, and these bristles are used for brushing. And the taste of these twigs should be Kashaya Katu Tikta, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And the nuances goes on and on. Actually, it's not necessary, but just for you to understand how the depth of information. Kaninyagra samastaulyam. Kaninyagra. Kanini is the little finger. Kaninyagra is the tip of the little finger. Let the size of the twig that we use for brushing be the size of the tip of the little finger. Dwadasha angulam. Pragunam dwadasha angulam. 12 angula in length, which is approximately around 10 inches. What is the length of it? What is the circumference of the twig that we use? Even to that extent, we find the references in Ayurveda. If at all you have the habit of using this sweet toothpaste, if you try to switch over and find an alternative, not necessary that you should go in for the twigs, you can use various tooth powders. Fortunately, these tooth powders are still maintaining the aspects or the explanations or the philosophy of Ayurveda. One Ayurveda medicinal tooth powder, maybe I'll write it in the chat box. Dashanakanti Churnam. Dashanakanti. Kanti is the glow. Dashanakanti Churna is a medicine that is used for brushing. It should be available across. Dashanakanti Churnam is one of the medicine, or you have lot of tooth powders. At least using that tooth powders or selecting the twigs which are bitter, astringent, and pungent to brush your teeth, you will definitely feel that freshness in your mouth, which you will definitely not experience by using this sweet toothpaste. The first shock to the body starts with brushing. So tongue scraping, danta jihva nirlekanam has been explained in our Shastra, and using different metals including gold, silver, copper, all that is told. Let us not go into all that details. But after that, swishing, cleaning the mouth, swishing, and that is gargling and swishing the mouth and spitting after brushing is actually explained in Ayurveda. After brushing, it has been told that we have to swish 16 times after brushing. I've missed mentioning that. You can please add on. You have to swish 16 times after brushing. That 16 times is from Dharma Shastra. Dharma Shastra explains. Again, we have a tendency to use our fingers. Our ancestors used to use our fingers as toothbrushes with powders they used to brush. Dharma Shastra explains that this tarjani, the pointer finger, should be avoided to be used for brushing. We can use a middle finger or any other finger. Middle finger preferably for brushing. If at all we are brushing our gums or massaging our gums, etc., do not use a tarjani, is an explanation from Dharma Shastra. So swishing after brushing our teeth 16 times, and also after evacuation, swishing with water, it's been suggested to do 8 times after evacuation and 4 times after urination. You see the emphasis that is being given for oral hygiene. You can see that. And this 8 times, 4 times, 16 times is from Dharma Shastra. And even brushing, what side you face and brush, east or west. And not just for brushing, any activity that you do for the sake of improving your health. The Shastra suggests that, Ayurveda Shastra and Dharma Shastra suggests that one has to stand or face east or west and do all the activities that are aimed at improving your health. Not just for aim at improving your health. When we mean health, it also talks about health, wellness, or the health of the mind also, psychologically, or even for psychological health, or the health or wellness covering all dimensions of a person. For example, when we take blessings from elders and ancestors, we will ask them to stand east and we will do west. Even prayers, we will be standing east or west. All the activity that brings goodness to us is suggested to be done facing west or east. Then Kabala Gandusha is another thing that is being explained, which is now promoted, sometimes correctly, sometimes in a wrong way. It is unproportionately promoted is oil pulling. That is Kabala and Gandusha in Ayurveda. Mukhe Sanchare Kabalam. Holding some oil, especially sesame oil, holding it and swishing is called as Kabala. At the same time, Gandusha is the swishing is Kabala, and holding it, Gandusha is holding it. Holding it is Gandusha. Swishing is Kabala. Kabala and Gandusha are to be done simultaneously, or it can be done separately also using sesame oil. This has a lot of benefits. It has an unbelievable list of benefits, and the modern society also practices this in the name of oil pulling. I think most of you would have known about it, but the root of this wisdom is from Ayurveda. Bathing. Snanam is pavitram, it is auspicious. We all know that before doing any auspicious activity, we take a bath. Snanam is pavitram. Deepanam vrishyamayushyam snanam urja balapradam. Deepanam is, it increases the digestive fire. Vrishya, it is having an aphrodisiac property. Snanam urja balapradam, it improves the urja, the enthusiasm, it improves the balam of a person. This is the benefit of bathing in simple. But a common mistake that people tend to do is taking a bath after food. Taking a bath before food is being suggested, it is being promoted. It is highly advisable that one takes bath before food, because the bath increases the digestive fire, which prepares the system for the process of eating. But the bath done after food is going to cause disease, because it will hamper the process of cooking or digestion, because digestion is explained in Ayurveda in 2 dimensions. One is Deepana, which is preparing the system. Another one is Pachana, Pachana or Paka, meaning cooking. So bath will help the system prepare for a digestive process. But when a digestive process is already happening, a bath is going to totally screw up the process. So after food, at least for 2 hours after food, bath should not be done. But many times we see people that they finish breakfast and they do all the activities, some simple activities at home, and then go for the bath, and they wish to go to the office fresh. So this is one common mistake that people do, which can be corrected or avoided. Oil application before bath. Oil application has been explained as a nitya karma, that is to be done daily. Abhyangam acharen nityam. Nityam is do it daily. Abhyangam meaning it is not the abhyanga that people undergo in hospitals, where 2 therapists apply all over the body for 45 minutes, not that kind of an abhyanga, but applying simple, small quantity of oil, the places where you reach, you apply by yourself. Sorry. And an interesting aspect, a nuance about bathing is, Ushnambhuna adakkayasya parisheko balavaha tenaiva taduttamangasya balahrit kesha chakshusha. Ushnambhuna adakkayasya. Ushnambu meaning hot water. When you are using hot water for adhakkaya, for the body, it is balavaha. It is going to improve your bala or strength. Tenaiva, you use the same hot water. Uttamanga, for the Uttamanga, for the head, it is balahrit. It will destroy the strength, and more specially, it is bad for Uttamangasya balahrit kesha chakshusham. Kesha, the hair, and chakshu, eyes. So using hot water for bath, the 2 on the head, is detrimental for your strength, and it is also disturbing your eyes, and it is not good for your hair also. This is the reason this Indian culture of using this bucket and mug, where they can have a differentiation of temperature for the body and for the head. So nowadays, when people use this hot showers, water shower, when they go for a shower, they open the shower head and hot water flows first on the head. There is one more remote references. If at all we use warm water for the whole of the body in some situations where cold water is not possible to be, or the room temperature water is not possible to be used, the bath should be started. We should start the bath from foot upwards. At least from foot upwards, if you expose heat and then slowly introduce warm or little warm or water for your head, we are saved. But if your direct hot water is going to fall on the head, it is detrimental. So these are the factors what we saw about the oral hygiene, bathing, etc. are the cleansing of, are taking care of the cleaning processes or the cleansing or the purification of the body. When it comes to purification of the mind, we all know this prayers and meditation. It is already explained in Ayurveda also, in addition to the explanations in Dharma Shastra. Offering prayers, pranamam has been given special importance in Ayurveda also. And the most special period for that prayers would be the Sandhya period. And Brahma Muhurta period will be a special time for doing all these productive activities. For learning, Brahma Muhurta is the best period. But we should not be learning in Sandhya, which is the juncture between the day and night, which we have already discussed. And the next point, Achamana, as explained in Ayurveda and also as explained in Dharma Shastra, we see this reference in both Ayurveda and Dharma Shastra. Achamana is taking little bit of water on the right palm, making a small pit in the palm, having few drops of water and sipping it without making a noise. We would have seen our priests doing Achamana before the homas or prayers, even in temples, priests doing Achamana. We would have seen our friends, or we would have seen our family members, or we must be doing Achamana before and at the end of doing Sandhya Vandanam. So Achamana is a process which brings in purity, even as per Ayurveda and also as per Dharma Shastra. Again, sitting east or west, sipping is done thrice. The process of sipping this water is done thrice. There are a lot of periods where Achamana should be done as explained in Ayurveda and also in Dharma Shastra. But one important point, one important time where we have to do Achamana is before prayers. Before prayers, we would have seen our priests, our Gurukals doing this Achamana. So this is explained in Ayurveda too. I wanted to bring that information to you. Then comes Vyayama. Vyayama is exercise. The definition is Sharira Ayasa Jananam Karma Vyayama Ityuchade. Any activity that brings tiredness to the body is Vyayama. But unfortunately, what we hear nowadays is people tell, 2 times I go for walking, 2 times in a week I go for walking or jogging, and 3 times a week I do exercise. I do yoga. People consider yoga as exercise. The yoga asanas they do, it's definitely not falling in the category of exercises, because we already know that sthiram sukham asanam, the posture where one feels stability, sthirata, or sukha, comfort, is asana. So when you are doing some yoga asana, you should feel a stability and you should feel that comfort. But what happens is people push oneself, one is pushing himself or herself to do the yoga asana, sweating out, tired. After yoga asana, you feel tired, which means that you have done exercise. So we can comfortably call it as yoga exercise. We should not call it as yoga asana. So there is a day and night difference between yoga and exercise, because exercise is something that creates tiredness in the body. So there is a lot that we can talk about exercises, but one important point that we have to mention is moderation. Moderation is, we should not overexert ourselves while we do exercise, but this is a commonest thing that we see. Either people overdo or people don't do. We see both these extremes. People absolutely are sedentary, don't do any exercise, or we see people pushing one and doing exercises and creating problems, like they will have pains in the body, they will have a lot of disturbances. So half the capacity. So what is half the capacity? It is impossible, because Vyayama is a topic by itself. We can discuss for 1 hour, 1.5 hours. Maybe I can write a small, I'll give you a link of a small snippet of a topic that I did for a different community or a different forum. Yeah. So this is a small snippet about what is half the capacity, what is the duration of exercise. This is a YouTube link, which I did for another forum. You can listen, because I thought of saving time by sharing it so that I need not explain it here. Doing it at empty stomach. Many a times we see people having food and then going for exercise with an explanation telling that they need energy to do the exercise. So that means that they are pushing them so that they are taking something and doing. So doing exercise with on empty stomach is definitely a important advice. Nature, as I told you, nature gives a time slot for each and every activity. Even if you see a day, the nature gives a predominance of rajas, which makes us active to do all the physical activity or all the activities of our day. At the same time, tamas gets dominated in the night, which puts us, which slows us down, and we are getting a good sleep. So for every activity, nature gives us a time slot. Whatever the activity is, there is a time slot given by nature, and Ayurveda Dinacharya explains the time slots of different activities. When it comes to exercise, the only time slot is morning before food. Midday, no, it is not possible. Heat is strong. Increasing the heat of the body is not advisable. Evening, there is a deterioration in the level of energy. There is a drop in the level of energy one should not do. Night, when everything is slowing down, when the nature is directing us to slow down to establish sleep, when we do anything that is going to activate or going to energize or going to what you call activate and make us bright like exercise, it is contradictory. So the only time slot available for exercise is morning before food. There is another context in Ayurveda where the Shastra explains Dehavak Chetasam Cheshta Prak Shramat Vinivartayet. Prak Shramat, before the Shrama or before the exhaustion happens, we have to stop certain things. What are they? Cheshta of Deha Vak Chetas. The activities of body, mind, and speech should be stopped before it goes to a point of exertion. We should never exert our body. We should never exert by speaking, or we should never exert our mind by thinking. So before exertion, stop. So in another context that re-emphasizes this point. Then comes food. Jirne hitam mitam chadyat. The first golden rule explained in Ayurveda is Jirne hitam mitam. Ensure that you have digested the previous meal and you have good hunger for the current meal. And mitam, having a suitable food, the food that is completely suitable for you. What is suitable for you? There is no, I cannot give you a list that is suitable for everyone. What are good foods? That is the way in which the modern society or the modern world is obsessed with. We want to know what food is good. We call them a superfood. One period we'll tell moringa is good, and one period we'll tell this quinoa is good, and then kombucha is good, and the aspects of good or the food that are explained as good continuously keeps on changing, and we are looking for new good foods. There is nothing called good food. What is good for you can be completely harmful or bad for me. So it is contextual and subjective, and one has to take a food that is suitable for him. So what is suitable for you? There are so many criteria before understanding what is suitable for you. And it is not a rocket science to understand what is suitable for you. One has to understand the philosophy of Ayurveda. You cannot get a list of what is good for you. Going to a consultation and asking your doctor what is good for you is not a good idea. And it is not possible for a Vaidya to give what is good, or give a list of what is good for you. Because there are a lot of reasons, and I don't want to go into that. I might drift the topic. So one has to commence with prayer, not just Dharma Shastra. Ayurveda also explains about commencing the meal with a prayer. And the prayers, even Bhagavad Gita's explanation, we can find the tinge of Ayurveda there. Prana apana samayukta pachamyannam chaturvidam. Aham pachami. Krishna tells he's responsible for the chaturvida pachana of the food. Prana apana samayukta. Prana udana vyana apana samana. The pancha vatas or pancha vayus are utilized in the process of digestion. So offering to the fire god, offering to the needy, offering to the elders, these are all told both in Dharma Shastra and Ayurveda. Both Dharma Shastra and Ayurveda tells that the food that is prepared for oneself, that is prepared The food, you prepare food for yourself and you consume it for yourself, it is a papa karma. You have to offer it to others. You have to offer it to the poor, needy, who's dependent, who's not having an access to food. They are the people who are entitled for the food that you have prepared. And then you are entitled to have that food. And if you have preserved that food, at least you would have seen the tradition of people taking a small bolus of food and keeping it aside. At least a small bolus of food, keeping it aside for at least some ants and insects to have that, or offering it to the fire god. That offering to be done before consuming is seen both in Dharma Shastra and Ayurveda. You see the references both in our Dharma Shastra and Ayurveda that 2 meals are suggested. One is a mid-morning meal, not an early morning breakfast, but a mid-morning meal, and the first part of the night, the early part of the night. These are the 2 meal times, which is slightly coinciding with the present day famous concept of intermittent fasting. And I would not conclude that, okay, everyone from tomorrow start midday morning 2 meal a day. Not that way. I would not conclude that way. There are again reasons who, why, when, etc. There are seasons, there are conditions where Ayurveda also tells that pratareva bubukshitam, you'll be hungry very early in the morning. You can take a very early morning breakfast. So Ayurveda also gives a provision of breakfast. But the thing is, breakfast in any language is explained as alpahara, sitrundi. You see any language, even in French, it means a small meal. But we tend to load our system with a big meal with multiple ingredients, porridge with oats and fruits into it, nuts into it, seeds into it, and whatnot. Adding some protein powders, adding coconut oil, ghee, coconut milk. So many things are put into it, and it is make so messy. And adding on to the on top of it yogurt, because it is probiotic. That's all. That's a mess that we already do. So when it comes to order of consumption, Ayurveda adau maduram ashniyat, the first part of the meal should be sweet dominant. You see in our culture, if you think about going to a feast or a special meal or in a function, the first thing that will be reaching your plate or your leaf, banana leaf, will be a sweet. And having the sweet at the end in the name of dessert is something that is totally against the concept of Ayurveda. For one to understand why sweet is in the beginning, what happens, what is the deterioration that happens if someone has sweet in the end, I will have to go explain at least 45 minutes to 1 hour, the concept. But as I told you, I'm just mentioning the wisdom without going into the concept, respecting the time available. So adhau maduram, that is the first part of the meal, should be sweet dominant. That sweetness need not be always a dessert. It can be even rice or wheat or the grain contributes to the sweetness first. If you see I can tell the South Indian tradition, I'm not very familiar with the North Indian traditions. With the South Indian tradition, the first part of the meal will be, if at all there is a sweet will be served. Then rice with dal, which is not having any spiciness. It's just a plain dal without any much taste into it, and ghee will be given. That will be the first. Then gradually we will be graduated to sour, salty, and the end part of the meal will be bitter, pungent, astringent, which is contributed by buttermilk and the pickle. Buttermilk is astringent in taste. Takram lagu kashaya amla rasa, astringent and sour in taste. That is the nature of buttermilk. So buttermilk and yogurt are totally different. There are day and night difference between buttermilk and yogurt, but from a modern perspective, both are probiotics. What problem that is caused by yogurt, that is shopa, water retention caused by yogurt, can be cured by buttermilk. So buttermilk is a remedy or a medicine for a problem that is created by yogurt. You can see that different yogurt and buttermilk are. Right quantity, again, right quantity. Having a mita ahara, having a food in a right quantity is of prime importance when it comes to Ayurveda. Not just Ayurveda, even Dharma Shastra mentions annam na bahukurveta. Never take food in excessive quantity. Taking right quantity, what is the right quantity? It is a topic that we can discuss for hours. What is the right quantity of food? What is the reason behind the Ayurvedic advice of the quantity of food that one should consume? We get lot of explanation, one fistful, calorie-based count, nothing works. It has to be for you according to the season, according to the present situation, according to your hunger, and Ayurveda beautifully explains it. Maybe this time is not permissible. At this time, it is not possible to explain that philosophy behind it. As I told you, we need hours to discuss about it. But to give you an idea, we have to leave 1/4 of our stomach free for the movement of Vatati doshas. For Vata and etc. doshas, we should leave 1/4 of the stomach free. So don't fill up your stomach. So how to understand that you have finished, you have filled up 3/4 of your stomach, leaving 1/4 of the stomach? And that is understandable with a concept called satisfaction. Trupti, satisfaction. If you are satisfied, that means that you have filled 3/4 of your stomach. Even after satisfaction, we can go in for a full plate meal. That is possible. So that meal that we are going to, or food that we are going to have after satisfaction, is going to fill up the last quadrant of the stomach. And if you are not connected with the food, if you are not eating with a meditative mind, or if you are not mindful in your eating process, then the satisfaction and filling 3/4 will not coincide. Like in the parties where we eat and finish eating, you are not satisfied, but you are full until your throat. You cannot eat more, but still you are not satisfied. That happens when you are not having a mindful eating process, which we will be discussing soon. And here I would like to introduce about water, which I'm mentioning later, but introducing that here. If you are stopping at satisfaction and then drinking water, if you are stopping at satisfaction, meaning you are stopping at 3/4 of your stomach quantity, capacity, and then drinking water, this water is going to fill up the 4th quadrant, which is going to impair your digestive process. That is why the Shastra mentions Bhojanante Vishapradam. Drinking water at the end of the meal is Vishaprada. It is going to act like a poison. Bhojane chamritam vari. Bhojane, during food, that vari, water, will act like an amrita or nectar. So we will be having a little more clarity about this. So general upadeshas related to food. Time, yeah, I have 10 minutes. I think I can comfortably conclude in 10 minutes and give some time for discussion too. Na nindyat, we should never criticize food. Na tishtet, we should never stand and eat. Nowadays, it's a curse that we have to go to these wedding receptions and they will have a buffet, we stand and eat. Standing and eating is not acceptable, both as per Dharma Shastra and as per Ayurveda. Navadet, never speak during eating. Eating should not be an act of socialization. Eating is actually a ritualistic process. That is why Brahma Arpanam, Brahma Havir, Brahmagnav, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhina. We consider this as a Brahma Karma. All the process, eating, digestion, the food, everything is supreme. Annam na bahukurvita. Do not eat more than what is required. That is, stop appropriately. We have discussed about what is appropriate. To a certain extent, we had discussed. Nati drutam na vilambitam. Never very fast, never very slow. Some people tell you have to chew 60 times, you have to chew 40 times. You will be obsessed. If you are obsessed in counting your number of chewing, you are not having food with a mindfulness. So that is also not correct. Nati drutam. You should not just gulp off or just rapidly eat. Atyushna lavanam tejet. The food should not be so hot in potency and should not be so hot in touch also. Hot in potency meaning pungent in taste. Food should not be so salty also, because these are the properties which are, these are the tastes which are having strong Agni Mahabhuta, strong presence of the fire factor. So it should not be taken. Excessively hot and excessively salty food should be avoided. The general Upadesha continues. What is the ideal food? Now they tell this calorie, this much of protein, this much of carbohydrate, and this logic continuously changes, but the Ayurvedas say about a complete meal is Shadrasam Madhura Prayam. Madhura Prayam is predominantly Madhura, predominantly sweet in taste. Shadrasam, having all 6 tastes. That predominance of sweetness might give a misleading or a misconception that Madhura, people understand, yes, Madhura is sweet, but the sweet that is mentioned here is not the dessert. Our dessert should not be the predominant part of a meal, or having sweet substances doesn't indicate always including sweet food on our meal. The sweetness of this Madhura Prayam, which is the tenet of Ayurveda, is contributed by the old rice or old wheat. Why old rice and old wheat? Again, there are a lot of logic and reasoning that one has to take. Old rice and old wheat, which are easy to digest. I'm not going there, but just to mention, rice and wheat contribute sweetness, and that sweetness that is contributed by rice and wheat is acceptable. That is not going to do an unnecessary increase or an unwanted increase of kapha or an unwanted kapha, which is like contributing to obesity, metabolic disorders, etc. The sweetness contributed by rice and wheat, when taken appropriately, cooked appropriately, will not contribute to this metabolic disorders, diabetes, etc. Now people are cursing rice as carbohydrates, but there is a whole lot of logic. In fact, recently I gave a lecture about rice, 2-3 lectures about rice is nice. That was the topic, explaining about the concept of rice. There is a lot of misconception about rice and also about wheat, but our ancestors had a heap of rice, had a mountain of rice in front of them, and the vegetables were accompaniments. But nowadays, what people do is, people take a vegetable dominant meal. The Shastra tells, Shaka avaran na bhuyishtam kadayet. Shaka and avara. Ayurveda tells that Shaka and avara, vegetables and pulses, that is the dals and things, should not be the dominant portion of our meal. So then what should be the dominant portion of the meal? The dominant portion of the meal should be rice and wheat, because we understood that the meal should be Madhura Prayam, sweet predominant. All the other 6 states are naturally present in the process of cooking. It doesn't mean that when Shastra tells you have to take 6 tastes, it doesn't mean that you have to select items with all 6 tastes. In our tradition of eating, the 6 tastes are inherently present. We need not intentionally include it. It will be inherently present in the cooking process and our eating order. And food should not be predominant with vegetables and pulses. And food should be drava in nature, liquid or semi-solid in nature. That is a advice, always a simple advice. Reduce amla, lavana, katu rasa. So take food that is predominantly Madhura rasa. We understood what is the predominance of Madhura. Ahasan, do not laugh, do not socialize. Tanmana bhunjita, that is, eat food with a completely devoted mind. Tanmana bhunjita. You should not have food with excessive hunger. You should not wait until you have an voracious hunger. You should not wait until that point. With hunger you should eat, but you should not eat with excessive hunger. That will also create problems. We have already understood that we should not eat food at Sandhya. Na naktam dhari bunjita. We should never eat curd in the night. We see many people having a habit of taking curd in the night. Curd should not be taken in the night. However, buttermilk can be taken in the night, because we understood curd and buttermilk are completely different. Foods not recommended for daily use. These are the list given in Ayurveda Shastra that should not be taken on a daily basis. But we see people take this on a daily basis. If at all you are someone who is taking this on a daily basis, stop. So I've chosen the points which can be implemented right away. That is why the topic is drifting. Kilata dadi kurchika. Kilata dadi kurchika, or the milk products like cheese, yogurt, different types of cheese and yogurt. These products are not to be taken on a daily basis. Seasonal understanding, regional understanding, who is taking, why he is taking, it is there. You cannot understand milk Milk and milk products are not the same. When I tell yogurt and buttermilk are different, similarly, milk and milk products have totally different properties. Ghee is something that can be taken on a daily basis, but the source of ghee, yogurt, cannot be taken on a daily basis. So that's the nuance. Kshara, alkaline-based food. Now we have crossed this alkaline theory, acid theory, etc. Alkaline food, lot of raw vegetables can have this alkaline content, or we all know the list of alkaline foods. Now, Dr. Google is readily available with all informations of this kind. Sukta, vinegar, should not be taken on a daily basis. Ama moolakam, uncooked radish. Bala moolakam is a tender radish. Tender radish has been suggested to be taken among the vegetables. All the vegetables are suggested to be taken when they are fully grown and mature, except one, that is moolakam, radish. Radish should be consumed when they are tender. Don't consume a fully grown radish, as per Ayurveda. Krisha shushka mamsa, that is emaciated and dry meat, should not be taken on a daily basis. Varaha avigo matsya mahisha, pork, meat of sheep, cow's meat, fish, and buffalo's meat should not be taken on a daily basis. See, Ayurveda, people believe that Ayurveda is a vegetarian science because it is an extension of the Vedas. Yes, it is true, it is an extended part of Vedas, but it is not, this Shastra is not given for one sect of people, it is given for the whole mankind, whole humanity. Everyone living on earth can make use of it. So, meat is also a part of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is not a vegetarian Shastra. However, meat is not promoted. Masha Nishpava, that is black gram, and Nishpava is a type of beans, a black variety of beans. Shulaka, underground tubers. Pishtannam. Pishtannam is the pastries or the food that is prepared with dough, that is like chapatis, etc. should not be taken on a daily basis. However, it can be taken in different forms. Pastries, mainly pastries, like baked pastries, etc. Virutakam, sprouts, should not be taken on a daily basis. Sushka shaka, dried leafy vegetables, no. Phanitam, molasses. Some area people have the habit of taking molasses, that should also be not taken on a daily basis. Divaswapnam, sleeping during the day, it is generally to be avoided. It causes unwanted increase of kapha, which can contribute to obesity, lethargy, metabolic disorders. Who is permissible? As I told you, there will always be an exception and nuance, provisions for some people to do. So who and when day sleep is permissible? Bala and Vriddha, a young child or a Vriddha, an age-old person, is having a permission to sleep during the day because their dhatus are in such, their structural elements are in such form that necessitates daily sleep. Abhuktavat, if you are sleeping during the day, if you want to sleep during the day for some reason, if you are sleeping during the day to compensate the sleep that you have lost in the night, then abhuktavat, you can sleep without eating, without having food. At empty stomach, you can sleep during the day. And Ayurveda explains that in Grishma Ritu, in summer season, one can sleep during the day. That is, even in modern context, they explain it as siesta, sleeping during the hottest period of the hottest season. Ayurveda gives the explanation the same way. I think the modern theories are following the tradition of Ayurveda, which is our practice of our ancestors. After the meal, if someone is really sleepy and willing to sleep, then sitting or reclining and sleeping does not cause this increase of kapha, which I had mentioned in the previous slide. See the nuance. You lie down and sleep after meal, you are going to end up with a problem. You sit and sleep, you will be not encountering the problem. See the nuance in the explanation. This is the reason our ancestors will have a habit of having a rest in the easy chair after their meal. So after meal, a Shankramana, relaxed walk is advisable, whereas severe exercise or physical activity is not advisable. A relaxed walk and then lying down is possible. After a relaxed walk, lying down is possible. No strenuous work should be done for one muhurta, 48 minutes after meal. In the evenings, we have to slow down along with the nature. I had mentioned about this. Enhance the tamas and enjoy the sleep. As the environment becomes dark, the climate around us becomes dark, pleasant, etc., the tamas predominates in nature. And when the tamas in us also predominates, we enjoy a good sleep. So we cannot tell that rajas and tamas are bad. It is, if you are not having tamas, you are not sleeping. So brightness is something that can disturb the establishment of tamas. The concluding slide is Ayurveda Upadesha on Dharma. What does Ayurveda say about Dharma? Directly about Dharma. Sukhartha sarva bhutanam mata sarva pravrittayah sukham chana vina dharmat tasmat dharma paro bhavet. Why should one follow Dharma? Every living being, sarva bhuta, every living being is doing activities for the sake of, or with the aim of getting comfort, for the sake of getting sukha. But if we are doing that activity without dharma, what you achieve is not a real sukha. So any activity that is done with dharma will give you a proper sukha. Any activity that is not done with proper dharma will not lead to sukha. So following the dharma in our daily activities is essential, and so one should follow dharma. Okay. So if there are any doubts, I'll be happy to answer the doubts. I hope I'm on time. Yeah, I have 10 more minutes to, or maybe a little more also, to answer your doubts.
Can you stop screen sharing?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Parthasarathy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Absolutely fascinating. It took me 2 minutes to reach here because I had just gone to throw my toothpaste out of the window. So it took me 2 minutes to come back. So thank you so much. Fabulous session. I can tell you there are so many questions about, hot water on the body, cold water on the head. I mean, various questions, tea, coffee, what is a good time to eat? I mean, we have too many questions. So I don't think it's going to be. So what I will do is I will ask you a few of the questions quickly.
Yes.
So we'll try and address as many as we can.
Yeah.
You have answered during the course some of the questions you already answered. There is a gentleman who has asked, I think you answered this, if eating wrong food is the, is it applicable to the Western world? Is Ayurveda applicable to the Western world as much as it is to India? I think you answered that towards the end of your presentation, very clearly said that it's universally applicable. He also asks, what is the role of past life karma in disease?
Yes,
if it is only what we eat, is there a role for past life karma in disease?
The Shastra also tells, Purva Janmarjitam Papam Vyadi Rupena Jayate. So the Papa of the previous Janma can present itself in the form of Vyadi in this Janma. But there is also the concept of this, the vastness of karma gives us an understanding that in the good karma of this Janma can help you recover from that, or suffer. The amount of suffering or the amount of recovery from that depends upon the karma too. So it's a detailed topic. Actually, we can discuss about this topic for hours.
But there is a role, you believe?
Yes, of course there is a role.
Okay. Another question is, what is Ayurveda's view on having coffee or tea immediately after brushing your teeth in the morning? And please don't say it's a bad thing, my life will change completely.
So if you are consuming coffee and tea as a first thing in the morning, the simple change that you can do is, before consuming coffee and tea, at least have some water, so that coffee and tea is not the first thing that you introduce into your stomach. That simple change can make a big difference. So that means that bed coffee, if you are having, definitely not acceptable.
Understood. Another question, are millets a healthy substitute for rice? Question number 1. Go ahead, then I will ask.
Millets, yes, millets are also important when it comes to, even in Indian culture, we see lot of millets. But what we can notice is millets are always practiced in specific seasons. And it is millets are in practice or in use in particular regions. It is not used throughout the country. In some regions, in some seasons, there is a seasonal and regional understanding. For example, when we see quinoa, it can also be considered as a variety of a millet. But the Shastra gives a direct explanation that too much of intake of millets can create problems because it is Ushnavirya, it is hot in potency. So the ideal thing is to stick on to rice and wheat generally, but there are seasons, reasons, and regions where millet is permissible. One cannot go in for a full millet diet.
There are many organizations who are spending crores of rupees advertising that lots of their foods are gluten-free, etc., etc.
That's a marketing gimmick.
Question
actually.
is, does gluten in wheat cause or aggravate diabetes? And is rice okay to be consumed even if one has diabetes?
Rice is okay to be consumed even if one has diabetes, if at all they follow all the advices of Ayurveda when it comes to cooking, eating, selecting, when, how they eat, etc. If that is followed, then rice is absolutely possible. In fact, when people come for treatment, I think there should be some of our patients also, if at all they are in this group with diabetes. On a funny note, when they ask a question, how come I got diabetes so much reduced? On a funny note, we'll tell that our rice helped you to reduce your diabetes sugar levels. We give rice, being in South India, we cannot think of an item that does not have rice into it. May it be a sweet, may it be a food, rice is a part and parcel of our meal. And we give the same rice and people find difference in reducing their sugar levels also. So rice can be definitely consumed, but there are certain ifs, buts, and whys that has to be understood. If possible, maybe there is always a chance to catch up with some other session. Or if possible, I'll try to share some links, if at all, if it is available about rice, as nice topic that I gave, I will share with the group. I will share with the organizers so that they can share it across. And when it comes to wheat, again, this is all the, what do you call, the false marketing strategies, etc., to promote gluten-free food. Gluten will be criticized and gluten will be cursed. Gluten is not something really bad. Of course, we need not see wheat from the angle of gluten. There are very few people who have gluten intolerance. And the problem is actually wheat. Many a times people don't get wheat, they get this maida, and which is having artificially enhanced gluten, which is mixed with so many chemicals and stuff like that, which will create problem. So they will generally conclude it on wheat. Most of the people who tell that they have gluten intolerance, we have seen that they really don't have. Many a times we have a doubt that whether is it a fashion to tell that they have gluten intolerance and lactose intolerance or not. To that extent, we have a confusion. But when people tell that they have gluten intolerance and lactose intolerance, when they come to the hospital, the strategy we use is, we will give you milk and milk-based products, we will give you wheat. If you have any problems, we are responsible, we are in charge of it. And 99% we will not have problem. Of course, there are very few people who are really gluten intolerant and really lactose intolerant. But we need not be worried about rice and wheat. Our North Indian friends and brothers who are surviving on wheat and roti, are they everyone struggling and suffering? Or did our ancestors who survived on wheat, did they have any problems? The answer is no. That justifies.
An interesting question is that, is it okay to eat ice cream stroke very cold food? What is your
cold food? Having cold food is a factor that produces ama. Ama is difficult to be explained, but a digestive toxin. Cold food disturbs the digestive process and it produces ama. So cold food is something that is not advisable. However, there is a small provision to take slightly cold food in summer. And also there is a small provision in a different context. There is a provision to take not cold, but food that is not hot in winters, especially for breakfast.
Talking
But
of
ice cream as such, no.
Talking of breakfast,
Yeah.
there is another very interesting thought is that, lots of people say I'm eating very healthy because I eat fruits for breakfast. So I eat a large bowl of fruits for breakfast, and that is considered very healthy. Is that something Ayurveda subscribes to?
Not really. Not really. There is a season, understanding of season, understanding of region. As I told you, nature always tells what, there is always some whispers from nature which we miss to understand. Our ancestors heard the whispers and followed, and that is called as tradition. We missed to hear the whispers, and we are all stuck with such explanation, and we are looking up to some researchers. Fruits are explained in the context of summer. I think I have shared an article about fruits. Maybe that article can be shared. I request the organizers to share that article about fruit and the concept of seasons, when Ayurveda suggests fruits, when Ayurveda will not suggest fruits. For example, in our winter season, we cannot find any fruits around us, which means Ayurveda, the nature tells don't eat fruits. It is not required. But in summer, just before summer setting in, the Shastra tells one has to take liquid food, sweet in taste, easy to digest, cold in potency. Nature is ready with fruits. So what is required for us will be readily available in nature. So fruit is not available round the clock. In winters of some country, we import fruit from another country which is having summer. So we have fruits round the clock. As children, we all would have like dreamed mangoes in the month of March, April, because we know that mangoes are going to come. They are on the way. Mangoes are on the way to our tables. We will be dreaming of mangoes. We'll be eagerly waiting for the mangoes. But the present day kids, we get mango 365 days in the market. But mangoes are not available 365 days in nature. It is sourced that way. I hope that had answered the question.
Yes. Absolutely. Is there any blog or publication by you advising about Ayurveda in more detail? Because we've got so many questions. I can already see there's still questions coming in. It's not possible considering the paucity of time. Any other way people can listen to this wisdom or read about this wisdom that accessible?
Just like Vedanta, writing is not that easy. We cannot convey the message through writing. So writing a blog and writing a book is close to, at least for me, it is close to impossible. But I'm pushing myself to do something. And as a result, I came up with some 2 blog posts. But we have started creating some, thanks to this COVID pandemic, we have started preparing some podcasts, some audios. We are giving lectures, and few of the lectures are available online. I think YouTube, there are lectures available online. But for sure, I have dedicated a website for the sake of this, Ayush Krama. You would have seen this Ayush Krama, Parthasarathi at ayushkrama.com. Ayush Krama is a website which we have started to propagate this authentic Ayurveda knowledge, the wisdom of Ayurveda.
One last question. We have a lot of questions which obviously we can't answer here. Can we send some of them to you by mail or whatever, and whenever you have the time and whenever it is convenient to you, can you try and answer some of these questions? Well, a lot of them are, should I do this and should I do that, which is like, it's not, they're slightly personal questions you can't ask in a forum like this. Is it okay if we send it to you, and will you find time to answer them?
Time is not a problem, but I'll try my best, because again, if I'm to give an answer to the question, I can just relate and give an answer. When I am to write the answer, it is always difficult. At least for me, it is difficult, but I will definitely try my best to give the best possible answer.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor. In the last 1.5 hours, you have changed sleeping habits, eating habits, walking habits, exercising habits, yoga habits, almost all habits of everybody attending this. Because I'm sure at some stage or the other, we were doing something that was not prescribed by Ayurveda. And logically what you said makes so much sense. And you know, you've used nature and the flow of nature and logic and seasons. Everything you said was backed by logic, and it makes so much sense when you put it together so wonderfully and so nicely. Like I said, before I even started the questioning, I've thrown my toothpaste out of the window already. So you know, that's one way to start. I would like to request Swamini to please come and thank Dr. Parthasarathy for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swamini.
True to your name, Parthasarathy. I feel like we have all been in your chariot where you have
Oh my God.
taken us on this journey of
Thank you so much.
you know, this the beauty, the purity, the clarity of Ayurvedic wisdom has been brought alive by you. And you told us how to pause. And you know, one of the nicest things about listening to you is you say all the things that we should not be doing in such a nice way that you want to emulate it, because you speak the voice of the Shastra and Ayurveda. And so, where to pause, where to break, where to look, you know, as we were traveling with you on your chariot, um, how we can enhance our life and how we can make it more meaningful so that it is truly a sadhanam for dharma. So bringing in Dharma and Vedanta, it was a very beautiful Prayaga confluence of so many ideas and the richness and the wisdom of our culture. So we are very, very grateful to you, Vaidya Parthasarathy ji, and prayers that your sharing reaches all parts of the world. I'm sure a lot of us are going to head towards your hospital, and a lot of people will be consulting you, but obviously you are improving the quality of life for hundreds and thousands, and our prayers for your pursuits. So dhanyavadaha, thank you very much on behalf of the entire festival. Thank you. Om.
Thank you so much, Swamini. So thank you all. Thanks for the listeners. Thanks for the organizers for this wonderful session. Thank you so much. So it's a great honor for me again. It's a pleasure and an honor for me. I'll try to catch up with the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.